Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video I'm continuing my journey using patterned paper in epoxy resin. This time I'll be using J. Dixon's High Gloss epoxy resin along with some beautiful woodland themed scrapbooking paper. I'm continuing to learn what works and what doesn't work. So if you would like to join me in my mistakes and learn from them too, stay tuned and enjoy the video. The mould I'm using today is the Cascade Daisy Tray mould from Moulds and Shapes. I haven't used this one before and I needed something to draw around as a template for my paper pieces, and so I'm filling it now with plaster of Paris. I didn't make quite enough, so I needed to mix up a bit more, but basically I was filling it up with the plaster so that I had a nice solid template and it was nice and easy to just draw around it to cut out my paper. I enjoyed using paper in resin so much in last week's video that I decided to go on a bit of a shopping spree to buy myself some more papers, and the best place for that, in my opinion, in the UK is Charmed Cards and Crafts. That's where I always buy paper from. I love their selection. So I will leave a link in the video description to this paper, which is the Forest range from Stamperia. And it's 12 by 12 scrapbook paper. It's double-sided and it's nice and thick, so it's perfect for this. And I just loved the fox on there. I really wanted the fox to be on my tray. It looks so proud the way it's standing there. And yeah, I wanted to use the fox. So this is the background paper I'm going for, and that's really what sold the whole set to me, was the background. I thought it would be perfect for this tray, and it's mountains and a lovely river scene. It's just gorgeous, and it's in like a loose watercolour style, but it's also distressed and it's got an aged look to it, and that's really good because I had a bit of a mishap later on, which you will see soon, and the fact that the paper was supposed to look a little bit aged and distressed meant that my mishap kind of blended in with that, and it wasn't quite as prominent as it would have been otherwise. Right, you just saw me draw around the plaster template, and then I just had to cut it out, and that was ready to go at the back of the tray. That's the last thing that will go in. Because it's a very deep mould with 3 separate kind of layers, I can have a foreground and a background, and the fox will be going right at the front, so I just needed to cut that out as well. Right then, because the finished tray is smaller at the front than it is at the back, it's got that cascade effect, I needed a separate template for the front part so that I could cut out the fox accurately. And so here I'm just using a pencil crayon and some paper and kind of tracing around that smallest part of the template that I made before with the plaster of Paris. And yeah, just so that I can, be more accurate with my cutting. Right, I cut the fox out already, and so now I have got the brown paper template that I've just made. I could draw around that, just around the bottom, once I decided what position I wanted the fox in. And so once I'd drawn it around the template, I could cut it out, and I knew it would fit nicely into the mould when I've mixed up my resin. Right, I decided I wanted some foliage right at the very front, in front of the fox, and I had a look through the pack and I found some leaves on this page, and there was some on another page as well, so I got to work cutting out lots of leaves, and then they were ready to be sealed in the next step. In last week's video, when I used paper, I sealed the paper with spray varnish and it worked really well. But someone in the comments did say that they use Mod Podge and that works well too, so I thought I'd give that a go. However, I don't have Mod Podge, I have PVA glue, a very old PVA glue. It needs throwing away really, it's going a bit yellow and horrible. Anyway, it still works, so I use that instead because I think it's very similar to Mod Podge, and I just used my gloved finger and rubbed it all over all the pieces of paper on both sides, and I've got a silicone sheet there as well so that it doesn't stick to it. Right, once the glue had dried on my paper pieces, it was time to start with the resin. Today I'm using J. Dixon's High Gloss Epoxy Resin, which is without doubt my favourite epoxy resin from the J. Dixon range. It's crystal clear, there's no smell to it, and one of the best things about it is it's very durable, it's scratch resistant, and they've added a new kind of UV inhibitor which helps it to not go yellow as quickly. You'll never stop epoxy resin from yellowing, it will all happen over time, but this inhibitor will make it last a lot longer in the sunlight without going yellow. This resin has a 1:1 mixing ratio by volume, so I've measured out 100 millilitres of part A and 100 millilitres of part B, and then I give it a really slow mix for around 2 to 3 minutes. I only wanted resin to the top of that first step in the mould, and so it was a little bit of guesswork for how much resin I would need, and I was really quite pleased with myself because it was spot on. I had just the right amount to go right up to the top of that first little level, and so once all that was in, I needed to add my leaves. And I've sped this part up because I made a little bit of a mistake. I put my leaves in on the wrong side of the tray, forgetting that I needed to mirror what I'd planned in my head, and it needed to be on the other side. So I got them all really carefully arranged and pushed underneath the resin, all looking really good, and then I suddenly realised they were on the wrong side. So I needed to fish them all out and put them into the other side. Yeah, well, these things happen, don't they? So this was filmed in the morning, and once I'd rearranged all of my leaves, I left it to cure, and then at the night time I needed to add my fox, so we'll go to that step now. Excuse the poor quality picture, it's the same old problem I've been having a lot lately, where filming at night time it comes out like this. But anyway, let's see. This is where the first problem occurred. What I had planned on doing was to put the fox on top of the resin while it was still nice and sticky, but it had gone a little bit too far. It was spongy but not sticky, if that makes sense, and so what I decided to do was glue it onto the almost cured resin, and so I've just put on some PVA glue onto the fox and I've let that dry. The thing is, I was in a bit of a rush. I've been a bit delayed with my video this week and I needed to get it finished, so I wanted to get it glued on, let the glue dry, and then add the last of the resin, so then it would be ready the next day. And so it's my own fault really, I think, for rushing, and this didn't really work very well. You'll see why soon, but yeah, sticking it on with glue onto the resin didn't really work. But that's what we do, isn't it? On here we learn from our mistakes, and hopefully you can learn from my mistakes too, and it's not a disaster, is it? If you're learning something, it'll help you. So yeah, now I am waffling. Let's get on to the next step. Right, once I felt like the fox had long enough for the glue to dry, it was time to add the rest of the resin and the background. I mixed up my resin just like before and poured it in so that it reached up to the top of the second step on the mould. I needed space at the top for the paper and then some more resin on top of that. And that was the plan anyway. But I tell you what, I had such a hard time with this. I really did struggle, and I would definitely do it differently next time. I think that what would work best is at this stage, I would leave that resin to cure until it was tacky, and then smooth on the paper on top of that and pour some fresh resin on top of the paper. But I decided to save time, I would do it all in one go, put the paper on and put some resin on top, and it would all be fine. But it wasn't. The paper kept floating to the top. And that didn't happen in my last video when I made the coasters. And the only thing I can think of that was different is that I sealed them with spray varnish, and the paper did not float up. It almost was more likely to sink. In some cases it did sink to the bottom of the mould. But this just floated on the top, and I'm thinking it's because it was so thoroughly sealed with that PVA glue. Yeah, I'm going to try this again, I think, and I'm going to go back to the spray varnish because this just didn't work for me at all. Anyway, I did stop filming after a while because I was starting to get stressed, and I needed to just take a moment and then come back to it and finish it off. But what I did do after I'd stopped filming was I poured some of my leftover resin on the top of that paper because there was still a little bit of space on the top. So that's what I did after I'd finished filming when I was having a little bit of a meltdown. I also made a little coaster off camera as well because there was some resin left, and I really quickly I cut out some more patterned paper and just really quickly made a coaster, and that turned out all right actually. You'll see that in a moment. So are you ready? Are you ready to see this coming out of the mould and to see how it turned out? Okay. Okay then, so when I came back to it the next day, yeah, it was a bit patchy on the back. The back definitely was not as good as it could have been. But don't worry too much about the back here. Let's worry about the front. Let's get this out of the mould. So for a moment, I'm going to go into super slow motion because I want you to look at something. As I turn it over, look how the light shines through it in patches. That's the problem I had. So what happened was the resin seeped into the paper in patches where I must have been not as thorough with the PVA glue as I thought I'd been. And so in patches it seeped in and caused little bits of transparency and darkness. And like I said at the beginning, I kind of got away with it because it's a distressed style of paper. But I wasn't happy with those dark patches, and my heart did drop a little bit. And I thought, oh no, I'm not going to have a video this week. But then I thought, no, it's not that bad. Let's still make a video of it. It'll be okay. And I think it is okay. I quite like it. So let's bring it to life a little bit with some gold edging and really draw attention to those steps in the edges of the tray, because that's a really lovely detail that looks much better if you emphasise it with some gold or silver or any other colour. Before we do that, let's have a close-up at the fox and you'll see what I mean about the PVA glue. I stuck it on, didn't I, with the PVA glue, and it's got those little I don't know what you would call them. I suppose they look a little bit like bubbles of glue in there where it just hasn't dried properly. So yeah, that's another thing I would do differently next time. I wouldn't stick it on with glue. And that's the coaster that I made really quickly in about 2 minutes before the resin started to get too sticky. And it's all right, isn't it? I quite like the coaster. So the marker I'm using is my chrome marker from Let's Resin. It's a gold one. That's kind of a contradiction, isn't it? It should be chrome, shouldn't it? But no, they're all called chrome markers and it's a gold chrome marker. Anyway, all I'm doing is going around the corner bit of the edges, if that makes sense. I'm not colouring them all in. I just want a little line around the corners, and that's all I want, just to emphasise it without colouring them in completely. And if you're wondering what that is underneath the resin tray, it's that plaster of Paris one that I made at the beginning. I found that it was really good for resting my new tray on while I did this, because it was still a little bit bendy and I didn't want it bending, so I put it on the plaster of Paris tray, and that worked perfectly for this. So yeah, that was very handy. So yeah, once that gold was on, it looked a lot better, and I did the same thing with the coaster, and now it's time to have some close-up peeks at these and see what we think. I've got to say, now I've got used to those dark patches, I actually really love this. It's really grown on me, and I think it just looks, it's got such a great feel of the woodland, hasn't it? It's just, yeah. Words escape me. I am happy with it. I'm relieved that in the end I liked it and I didn't give up. So I'm definitely going to continue exploring this technique. I want to get it right because it's got so much potential, hasn't it? There's so many beautiful papers to choose from that you can, make so many gorgeous scenes. So I want to get it right, and I will get it right. I'm determined. So if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to subscribe and you haven't already done so, please do that too. It'll help me a lot. And I will see you again next week. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.